Who oppressed their own minorities more? You must have read countless comments from Romanians saying that the evil Hungarians oppressed the poor Romanians in Hungary. And there is no doubt that Hungary, just like France or England, had a policy of assimilation towards its minorities. But what if I told you that Romania used much more radical means to assimilate its minorities than Hungary? In this video, we examine which country had more liberal minority laws and education systems. The 1868 Hungarian Nationalities Act, associated with József Eötvös, Minister of Religion and Education, was indeed one of Europe's most liberal language laws, as the first modern liberal language rights legislation on the continent. It granted linguistic rights to minorities, Romanians, Serbs, Slovaks, etc., including use in courts, administration, and education. Hungarian teaching was not mandatory in minority schools initially, and minorities had significant autonomy in education, allowing schools in their own languages. The 1879 law made Hungarian language teaching mandatory in elementary schools as the state language. Basic education could continue in minority languages, but weekly Hungarian lessons were introduced. This was indeed loose regulation, and minority schools' autonomy made enforcement difficult. 1907 Apani law under Albert Apani as minister. It tightened rules. State funding only for schools effectively teaching Hungarian, with teachers required to speak Hungarian. This increased Magyarization pressure, but did not close minority schools outright, tying support to conditions. Overall, the law was initially liberal but shifted toward Magyarization around the turn of the century, leading to conflicts. Comparison with French assimilation policy in the 19th century. French policy was much stricter and more centralized than Hungarian. In the 19th century, especially under the Third Republic from 1870, strong assimilation targeted regional languages, Occitan, Breton, Basque, Flemish, etc. The Jules Ferry Laws, 1882, introduced free, compulsory, secular education, but banned regional languages in schools. Children were punished. For example, is seen vergogna, shaming, penalty signs, corporal punishment for using their native tongues, leading to language decline. Many regional schools closed, and centralization enforced exclusive French education, unlike the Hungarian system where minority school autonomy persisted longer without such direct punishment. In France, the goal was total linguistic unity, suppressing minority cultures. Comparison with the Romanian education system. Dobruja from 1878. After annexing northern Dobruja, Romanization took place. Settlement of Romanian colonists, encouragement of Muslim Turkish, Tatar immigration, closure, or Romanization of minority schools. Laws mandated Romanian education and land distribution favored Romanians, leading to assimilation or departure of minorities. This was more aggressive than the Hungarian system, where minority schools persisted. After 1920, Transylvania and Dobruja, post-Trianon in Transylvania, closure of Hungarian and Saxon schools was then carried out. Land reform favored Romanians, universities, for example. Bolya University was Romanized, reduction in Hungarian schools. Saxon culture faded due to emigration and assimilation. In Dobruja, continued Romanization with school closures and settlements. This contrasted with Hungary's more liberal initial policy, where autonomy existed but later tightened. The Hungarian system was initially more tolerant but later assimilationist. French and Romanian policies were more centralized and suppressive. After 1918, Romania implemented assimilation policies in Dobruja, a multi-ethnic region with significant Greek, Turkish, and Bulgarian populations, aiming to Romanianize the area through various measures. These included forced settlement of ethnic Romanians to alter demographics, closure of minority schools to suppress non-Romanian education, disproportionate population exchanges that favored Romanians while displacing others, such as the 1940 exchange with Bulgaria affecting Bulgarians and Turks, expulsion of minority priests to undermine religious and cultural institutions, and imposition of discriminatory taxes targeting non-Romanians to encourage immigration or assimilation. These actions, often discriminatory and assimilatory, reduce the presence of Greeks, Turks, and Bulgarians, transforming the region's ethnic composition amid broader Romanian minority policies that left room for such practices. In Transylvania, approximately 200,000 Saxons, ethnic Germans, largely disappeared over 70 years through systematic measures under Romanian rule, particularly intensified during the communist era. This involved closure of German language schools to limit cultural transmission, mass immigration facilitated by Romania selling Saxons to West Germany for hard currency, with over 225,000 leaving between 1967 and 1989, and state-sponsored settlement of ethnic Romanians into traditionally Hungarian-majority areas to dilute minorities. The process accelerated post-1989, reducing the Saxon population from around 745,000 in 1930 to under 40,000 today, driven by economic decline, political repression, and opportunities in Germany. Regarding name Magyarization in Hungary versus Romanization in Romania, both involved replacing non-majority names with those of the dominant ethnicity, but differed in centralization and voluntariness. Magyarization in the Kingdom of Hungary, 1867 to 1918, was often more voluntary, motivated by social pressure and incentives like career advancement, though supported by government policies promoting Hungarian identity. Many non-Hungarians adopted Hungarian names for integration. In contrast, Romanization in Romania, especially under communism, was more centralized and coercive, part of broader assimilation efforts targeting minorities like Hungarians and Germans through state mandates, though some voluntary adoptions occurred for practical reasons. It included translating names and was tied to policies like those in Transylvania, resisting earlier Magyarization.
Gheorghe Gheorghiu Dej volt a román kommunizmus valódi kiépítője. A román kommunista párt vezetője, Ceausescu politikai nevelője, és kedves Klárika, akkoriban a magyarok román papírokat kaptak a kommunizmus ideje alatt, sőt, nagyon sokuk nevét elrománosították. A Ferencekből lett Franciszk, a Tamásokból Tomá, a Sándorokból Alexandru, és így tovább.
Romania was one of the last regions in Europe to abolish chattel slavery, with the final emancipation occurring in the mid-19th century. In the principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia, which later united to form modern Romania, slavery existed from the 14th century onward, lasting over 500 years. Most enslaved people were Roma, referred to historically as gypsies or Tsigani, who were legally owned as property by the state, Orthodox monasteries, or private boyars, nobles. They could be bought, sold, inherited, or separated from families, and were used for forced labor in agriculture, crafts, domestic service, and other tasks. There were also smaller numbers of Tatar slaves, primarily in Moldavia, often prisoners of war from conflicts with Crimean or Nogai Tatars. Over time, many merged into the Roma population. By the mid-19th century, estimates suggest up to 250,000 to 500,000 slaves existed, representing a significant portion, around 7%, of the population. Emancipation occurred gradually. State-owned slaves were freed in the 1840s, church-owned in 1847, and privately owned slaves finally in December 1855, Moldavia, and February 1856, Wallachia, influenced by Enlightenment ideas, liberal revolutionaries like Mihail Cugelnicianu, and broader reforms. No land or reparations were provided to the freed Roma, leading to ongoing poverty and marginalization. In comparison, the Kingdom of Hungary, including Transylvania under Hungarian or Habsburg rule, phased out chattel slavery much earlier. By the 13th and the 14th centuries, outright slavery had largely transitioned into serfdom for most groups, including non-Christians, for example Muslims or Khazars, who were often forced to convert. Roma in Hungary were generally not subjected to hereditary chattel slavery on the same scale as in Wallachia, Moldavia. Many were royal serfs, paying taxes or performing services, though some in southern Transylvania, under earlier Wallachian influence, remained in bondage until Habsburg reforms in the late 18th century. For example, Joseph II abolished remaining slavery in Bukovina, Transylvania, around 1783. Full serfdom abolition came in 1848 during the Hungarian Revolution, with earlier civil codes like the 1852 ABGB under Habsburg rule explicitly banning slavery. Thus, while both regions had exploitative systems affecting Roma and other minorities, Romania's institutionalized Roma slavery persisted centuries longer than in Hungary, making it one of Europe's last holdouts for chattel slavery until 1856, long after most Western and Central European states had eliminated it. Summary. Throughout the 19th century and up to the Treaty of Trianon in 1920, Hungary's approach was generally more liberal in comparison. The 1868 nationality law, under Joseph Eötvös, granted significant linguistic, educational, and cultural rights to minorities, allowing non-Hungarian languages in local administration, courts, and schools where minorities formed a substantial part of the population. Minority communities, Romanians, Slovaks, Serbs, Germans, and others retained considerable autonomy in maintaining their own church-run schools and cultural institutions for decades. While Magyarization intensified after the 1867 Compromise, introducing mandatory Hungarian teaching in 1879 and stricter conditions for state funding in 1907 under Apponyi, it remained largely incentive-based and educational rather than outright coercive. There were no widespread school closures, violent suppressions, or mass forced resettlements. Minorities preserved more space for identity and language use, even as pressure grew toward the end of the period. By contrast, Romania's assimilation policies were more centralized, oppressive, and radical, especially in newly acquired territories like northern Dobruja after 1878 and Transylvania after 1918. In Dobruja, Romanianization involved aggressive colonization by ethnic Romanians, land redistribution favoring Romanians, encouragement of minority emigration, especially Muslims, and the closure or forced Romanization of non-Romanian schools. The process was backed by restrictive citizenship laws that limited political and property rights for non-Romanians, creating a system of internal colonialism with heavy central control from Bucharest. After 1920 in Transylvania, this intensified. Hungarian and Saxon schools faced closures or severe restrictions. Land reforms disproportionately benefited Romanians. Universities were Romanized, and cultural institutions came under direct state pressure, often combined with economic discrimination and settlement policies aimed at demographic engineering. In summary, Hungarian policy started from a relatively liberal foundation, Europe's most progressive nationality law in 1868, and evolved into moderated assimilation through incentives and gradual pressure. Romanian policy, driven by rapid nation building in a more centralized state, employed more aggressive top-down tools, including economic leverage, colonization, and direct institutional suppression, making it the more radical and oppressive of the two in practice.